he's produced a table which sets out the number of World Cup players each of the Premier League clubs, and he's got a total grading over this. Let's speak to him now. Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm here with former England player Luther Blissett. When you look at the table here, can you explain the grading mark? Because it goes from 42 Watford at the bottom to 489 Chelsea at the top.
Oh, actually, you let the cat out the bag. I was. What I wanted to do was develop a chart for myself, but let the fans also develop their own chart to see what they thought about their own team, with consideration of how many players they had on their team that were internationals and at the World Cup, how many competitions they played, and to see where they actually felt they were with the risk of injury. So I don't necessarily want to go through my calculations because there's a whole lot more involved in it with mental stress and things of that nature. But it was just really a talking point for fans to talk about amongst each other to see where they think they might be.
Is it a simple correlation of the number of players that the Premier League sides are supplying to World Cup teams, or is there more to it than that?
I think there's more to it than that. I mean, I also looked at, because it's not that straightforward. You look at previous injuries to individual players. I mean, I think a classic one would be Mo Salah. I mean, I actually knew that he would not be as fit as they said he was, just because of the type of injury. I don't know. I didn't know the extent, but an upper limb injury, especially with the way that he powers himself and his speed. You power yourself with a great deal with your upper body, and then fighting off defenders. I thought there would be he wouldn't be as effective as he could have been, and actually stated that before the World Cup. So it's not only that; it's previous injuries where you think players have been, the amount of games they played, the amount of minutes they played throughout the year. So it's not just straightforward how many players and how many games they played, but a whole lot more went into it.
Well, also, I mean, in the same way that when you look at tennis players, there's a big difference between progressing to a final and having all your games in a Grand Slam that only go to 3 sets and having several of them go to 5. I suppose it depends on the intensity of the games throughout the season, but also when you're coming into tournaments like this, the same sort of thing, particularly where in parts of Russia it's definitely quite hot and quite debilitating.
Indeed. And then the type of player, I mean, for example, if you are a player who's used to playing in the heat, as opposed to, our players, so there was a whole lot more involved in this calculation than just straight calculation of how many games were played and how many players that were in the World Cup.
Something comes to mind while I'm looking sort of on the recovery side, because for the majority of the players, barring those that get to the final, they should get probably 4 weeks before the kickoff comes, or thereabouts. Yes. Just about 4 weeks. Would that be sufficient time, or would they need much longer? Because clubs will give them another couple of weeks anyway. On top of that, when they get back.
4 weeks should be. I mean, and also it depends on how you use that 4 weeks. I mean, let's face it. Without casting any dispersions, these are young, fit, healthy guys who, with a lot of stress, a lot of energy, want to let it out. So they may not use this time properly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I get what you mean.
So they may not. Yeah. So, but 4 weeks normally, in a professional setting, should be more than enough time. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel it should be, because the other things with now, as you well know, all the sports scientists, nutritionists, and all these people they now have at the football clubs, each player will get a specific schedule of what they need to do and how they go about making sure they can be in the best possible shape that they come back to, obviously get them back to peak fitness for maybe 2-3 games into the season, which is when they'd need them for that. So because you can't just do it just by being sat on your backside doing nothing. You should still be relatively active, doing stuff, whether it be swimming or playing. I mean, even if it's just playing tennis, as long as it's not over too many sets of playing tennis. But just the fact that you keep yourself going, that will be of benefit to you, surely.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I always think about is, there's not only a physical task, but there's a mental task. Let's say you've had an up or down season, you've had a manager fired, things happen in a club that a lot of people don't know about. You're almost winning, or you're not winning, or you fight through promotion, or you're not promoted, and then you are mentally exhausted. So it's not just a physical thing; there's a mental thing that a lot of players have to recover from as well.
Yes, and I suppose if you win the World Cup, then you feel on top of the world, literally. And if you underperform and social media gets to you, that may well have an effect as well. Thank you very much. That's Dr. Ralph Rogers, consultant, sports medicine and orthopaedic consultant.